So the current focus is the headlight. Probably do the tail light. Finish up on turn signals. I really don't know how far I'll get in this section, but I'm thinking I'm going to use the original bracket that comes across the front here that mounts the horn, the brake line, and a few other things. Maybe it'll help me keep these cables tucked in like that, nice and low to where they're not hanging way out. Not sure how. Oh, got to do something with the horn, and that's the fuse block right there, and that's the horn. Those will get tucked in somewhere to where they're not sticking out too far. Not exactly sure where yet. I can't really tuck them underneath the tank because I dropped the tank about an inch, and that really cut down on the room there. Now let's see where I get to. So what I'm thinking for the headlight is kind of a low mount in and around this sort of area. Until I get it mounted, I'm really not going to be able to step back and look at it unless I back this video up. That'll use the bracket that comes across here originally. I'll leave some of the mounts on it to tie in some of the wires. Then I've got to figure out what I'm going to do with this mess of wires here. I'll show you what wires I'm talking about. So they're all hidden on the other side, but I got to find a place for all those to call home. I do have a little bit of room under the tank here. I might be able to extend some of the wires and take the harness and just pull it back in there. If the purchaser of this bike chooses, what I'll end up doing is cutting the whole wiring harness in that area. Instead of just tucking it back in there, I'll shorten it and redo the wiring harness. Let's get this mounted up. So there it is mounted up. I've been walking around it, looking at different angles, thinking I need to raise it, need to lower it. Got online, looked at a bunch of bullet headlights on different bikes, whether they're long forked choppers, lowered, raked like this, or even stock. They kind of mount right about there, so I think I'm going to leave it there. Only one problem is factory bracket, which is for a horn and various other garbage. It don't work. That is a lot of wobble. If this thing was a plastic headlight, it would probably work, but this one is all aluminum and it's quite heavy, so I'm going to pull that bracket off and I'm going to build one out of something much thicker, much more stout, because that is like 3 to 4 times the thickness. All right, well, at least I know where it's going to sit, how I'm going to mount it. I'm going to get it built up. All right, well, there it is again. Got the bracket built, a whole lot more stout. Thing doesn't even move now. Solid, no spoingy springboard off that bottom bracket or the mount for it. Hooked the wires up. Well, it's daylight, so it's kind of hard to tell, but it was brighter than I thought it was going to be. I'll get that bracket off there, and I'll sandblast and get it painted. Looks pretty good, though. Well, I thought I was happy with the headlight. I actually flipped that bracket over. Instead of having it come up and curve out, I flipped it over. Now it comes down and back, and I mounted the headlight that way. It ended up moving the headlight back a couple inches and down about 3/4 of an inch, which puts it kind of in line with the tank. Oop, focused on my finger, and moved it back, and moving it back worked a whole lot better. Plus I added the speedo gauge, which kind of fills that area up a little bit better. I think I'm leaving it there. I like it a whole lot better. Much better. So here I am in my least favorite area, wiring. So I figured out I got a little bit of room on the backbone here. The tank sits up kind of about that much room. I took the fuse box, which normally mounts up here on top of the triple clamp, and I cut it down and took about 1.5 feet of wiring out of this thing. Normally from between this red plug and the fuse, there's normally like 2 feet of wire. Chop that back a bit. I don't think I'm going to do a whole lot of chopping back on this wiring harness, that is, unless the purchaser decides he wants me to go through this thing and basically tear it down the frame, repaint everything. And at that point, I'll build a custom harness out of the original harness and redo everything and pretty much take all this and shorten it down to where it all tucks up here really nice and tight. I mean, these controls, the forward controls have feet. I mean, this thing comes from here, wraps all the way up into here. The other one is just as bad. For now, I'm just going to tuck that underneath that tank area, tie it in there and tidy it up, and get this thing another step forward. So that's the bulk of what I'm going to end up doing. Speaking of bulk, look at that massive mess of stuff. It all fits under the tank. Might not be the most beautiful, but this is really how I'm going to mock them up pretty much, and then ride them a few times before I pull them all down. At this point, typically I would have cut the wiring harness all back, but I'm not going to spend the time doing it unless this buyer wants it redone. I'm moving on to the tail light. Tried to figure out a way to mount this tail light because I'm doing one of these LED strips again. I really like the looks of them. They're nice and tight and tucked in. Couldn't find a way to put a bracket on here. Now, I also did take a moment to scuff this all down and paint all the bare steel, including the plate up here. Filled in the edge here with a little bit of Bondo, and did the other side. It definitely needs a little more cleaning. But what I did for the tail light mount is I use this epoxy that pretty much sticks to everything. I put 3 layers of it in there, let one layer dry, come back out, do another layer. And I've used it on different stuff, and it really bonds it really nice and tight, really holds on. So I'm gonna get this wired in, and yesterday I also, on this bike, when it sat, it would leak oil. It would leak oil out of the input shaft right here. So I got a new seal for it, pulled that out. I was able to use a wood screw and tap into it and draw it out that way. Pretty easy repair. Picked the oil up for it today, and just get a couple more things done to it. Really what I'm left with is wiring the tail light. I did do the turn signals, which is what this extra glop of wires right here, these little ones. I ended up doing the turn signals right here on the sides. And these are not the ones that climb outward when they're on. It's just a solid blink. I would like to have a factory choke cable, but the one that was on this bike was busted. So I ended up using a rivet end and squeezing it on there and just mounting it up high. That would probably, no doubt, get moved and hide it a little better, as well as the ignition if said buyer wants it moved. Let me get this thing wired up. I got my wiring diagram figured out, or not diagram, but breakdown, because I got different colored wires here, obviously, than I do on the bike. So took a moment, figured out what colors went to what to do what particular function. Get it wired up, see how it looks and how it turns out. Okay, taillight's in. Let's check the taillight section. That looks great. Let's see if my brake lights work properly. Man, those are bright. And let's see if I can reach the blinkers. I like it. Looks good. I think I'll leave it.